Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Palantir's Alex Karp just gave an interview to Joe Lonsdale. This was a really interesting interview. Joe Lonsdale, also a co-founder of Palantir, and they have a podcast called American Optimist, where they essentially talk about optimism and embracing the American dream and things of that nature. Karp went on that podcast. It's been a request we've been all waiting for Karp and Joe Lonsdale to talk together, and he had some things to say about Ukraine. So I think there were a lot of good nuggets to pull from this podcast. This clip I want to react to is Karp basically laying out the case for why Palantir is in Ukraine, why they're working with them, and he says some interesting things about what it means to be working with Ukraine and, you know, why Palantir ultimately is a little bit more special than some other software companies to be able to get a role like that. So let's react to what he has to say, and then we'll go from there. Let me also just make sure my box is a little smaller. Okay, cool.
Or is this the general that's smart?
Okay, speaking of that, we got to talk about Ukraine then. Speaking of stupid generals to keep alive, that's great. Let's change gears to that. You were the first Western CEO to visit Zelensky in Ukraine. I thought that was a very bold thing to do. It was very, very cool. You went over there very quickly. Can you paint a picture of Ukraine's capabilities pre and post Palantir?
In the Ukraine stuff, I have to be super general,
Okay.
both because every government, first of all, and again, this is what I should say, but it also is true.
I love how Karp's mind is also running like 10,000 hours at a moment. He's like, he's like, I have to be super general because, and then you would think there's a predicate to that sentence where he finishes the sentence, but like he can't finish that sentence because he's already on to the next thought. It's actually kind of really cool.
The Ukrainians are courageous in a way that it's almost unfathomable when you're sitting here. Like, you meet people who are going into battle. The Ukrainian people, and I realize there's a lot of debate in our country, and I welcome debate as like a kind of very much on the side of the First Amendment and kind of all the way up to, you know, it being as expansive as it can be.
We used to have this debate inside of Palantir, by the way, early on a lot of issues, right? So that's something it was always part of the culture.
The right to express yourself, including things that will upset other people, is core to a functioning democracy. Yeah. And, you know, the fact that you're being offended shows you're living in a democracy.
Yeah.
And you know, that's, I try to empathize with the other side of that issue. I really, because I think you have to steel man all these arguments. But in the end, once you know, the rights you give up will be used against you.
It's interesting here because Karp is a little bit more to the left politically, and those on the left, or at least the modern left, would argue that free speech is not an absolute right because there is such a thing as hate speech. And, you know, if there are words that are defined as incredibly hateful, if you say those words, then that can backfire against you, or that, like, you know, it's a bad thing to say. It's hurting people's feelings, etc. I'm more on the other side of the argument, which is like, that is good, right? Because that it's not good to say hate speech, but it's good to allow people to say what they want to say and counter it with more speech, because that creates a functioning democracy where everyone has opinions that can be expressed and no one is censoring the other side. And I think Karp agrees with that, even though he's a little bit more progressively on the left. And so you've got a pretty unique character who is arguing for freedom of speech, which is typically now, for some reason, a right-wing thing, even though that should be like, it shouldn't be right or left wing, even though he's a little bit more on the left on economic issues.
And that's something that, you know, it does place a high burden on people who have to listen to speech that they find offensive, and I engage all the way to the margin and if engage with people whose speech I find offensive, and I talk to all sorts of people in all sorts of small rooms where, oh, by the way, there's a bobcat behind you.
Oh, wow.
A really nice.
That's a cool bobcat.
You guys should get that.
This part of the interview was pretty epic.
That on film.
That's from the national.
That is
park.
Nuts.
Alex always lives in the most interesting area. See how peaceful wildlife. Look at it. Wow.
That is like, it's like a mini tiger.
Wow. That is. Have you seen that here, Lutz? It's like.
It's here to honor you, Joe. I've never seen it before.
It's a good omen for us, Alex.
There.
In Ukraine, you went to these people, saw people in small rooms.
So they usually, when you go, you know, I've spent 20 years going to important institutions of all kinds, and there is often, but not always, a moment where you're in a small room with someone and they're like, yeah, but the truth is I don't agree with so and so. I don't believe. I think my leader is beyond or something.
Yeah.
This was a really interesting insight because he's talking about when you're in the closed door meetings with these people who are very high up, executives, heads of state, etc. The truth actually comes out as they're talking when it comes in regards to making a deal or buying software, whatever it is. Like the real truth about here's the reason we can't or we can do this. And Karp's obviously been exposed to a lot of that over 20 years, and being in Ukraine is likely no different.
There was none of that. Like
But being in Ukraine was different because none of that happened, even though for the past 20 years it has been happening. And I think that was the unique, interesting insight from what he's talking about with his meeting with Zelensky.
The amount of kind of deep patriotism, and again, I'm talking about all sorts of people. I like talking to people, quite frankly, who are unimportant. So I mean, I have a kind of honor to meet lots of important people.
And this is not because they're afraid of expressing a different viewpoint. It's because
the Ukrainians are. It is not a place where people are particularly afraid of expressing any viewpoint.
That's true.
You are going to hear a lot of free speech. They are fighting because they believe, and you can debate a lot of things, and there's a healthy debate about the Ukraine war in this country, but I can tell you from my experience on the ground, these people are fighting, and they are willing to fight. And, at a general level, without going into details, some of the places that have used our product have been bombed. People have died. And the same day, those people are back at work.
Wow.
Same day. It's like, and they're also very, very technical.
At a high level, what's Palantir able to do that other systems are not able to do?
So Palantir is useful for the Ukraine. Some of it's the part that's public is obviously documenting war crimes, but war crimes are hard to document because of data protection issues, to take it to court, where the evidence come from, who's touched it, chain of custody issues. So that's kind of we're doing. Understanding who's doing what on the other side is a classic use case for PG. So how is the adversary, how as a matter of theory, you can just go through the products. So there's a kind of the civilian prosecution, there's in the PG Foundry constellation, there's an ability to understand what the adversary is doing kind of with their operatives, who's doing what, how is doing it, with segmented data access, which is crazy important in the war. But it's funny is that people don't understand you need segmented or high data protection because the knowledge that these people have is so valuable, meaning people will die if it gets out, that you have to control who sees what. Gaia, meaning who is it will allow you on the battlefield to be able to see where in real time, what plan out your battle, attack, retreat, understand the adversary. And then the most powerful use of our product currently, and again, of one of our products, is being able to identify an adversary over a large line mass using AI. And that obviously it's been reported has led to a different level of ability to acquire the adversary's position.
Yep.
And there are so many lessons that we need to learn in this country, and we'll learn. But one of the obvious lessons is we are in a software world.
This is where he then goes into talking about how the United States really needs to spend money on software defense, even if it's just 1% of the DoD budget, because we have an advantage and we shouldn't give up that advantage right now. So I think that was what was interesting in this clip. And obviously, we've all read the reports of what Palantir is doing in Ukraine, and what Karp has said is not that different. But one of the unique insights I got from this is when he's talking to people in high-level situations in Ukraine, when he first went there in June 2022, it was a matter of days for the software to immediately be implemented, get up and running, and there was no kind of pushback on these issues that you have to deal with from a political perspective, because everyone there is so nationalistic. They have the pride for the country, and they still believe in democracy, i.e. free speech, so there's going to be healthy debate in that country, that it's one of those places where I think Karp is speaking more from a personal perspective that you don't want this place to go away. You want this place to be protected. You want the sovereignty of a nation like Ukraine, with all the corruption that may exist, with all the politics we have in the United States about should we be giving them more money, should we not give them more money, are we funding this war? What does it mean? There's a trillion questions you could ask. But from his experience being on the ground floor, this is a country that wants to fight because they want to maintain their sovereignty. They were theoretically doing nothing wrong when Russia invaded them. They were living their normal life. And now hundreds of thousands of people are at liberty of dying because simply Russia wants to invade. And it can get more political than that if you go into the nuances. But I think what Karp basically said is, look, our software is protecting them. Our software is acquiring the adversarial target. We actually know how to document these war crimes that are incredibly hard to do in terms of making sure there was a refugee crisis software that was able to match refugees from Ukraine in different homes. That's where Palantir software was also applicable. And then on the battlefield, obviously it's very applicable. And it seems like Karp is saying, from my experience being in Ukraine, this is a country that wants to survive and they want to fight. They're deeply technical. They're working their ass off. The place will get bombed. They'll be back at work tomorrow because they just want to maintain their sovereignty as a nation. My idea is that over the next 6-7 months, with interest rates coming down, hopefully, with inflation coming down, and with the economy getting into a better spot, and a lot of different catalysts across the economy, obviously AI getting into even better positions, all of these things are great if the Russia-Ukraine war can come to an end, or at least be settled in some peaceful way, and like this side gets this side gets that, and we're good to go in the next 6-7 months. And Palantir is one of the key reasons for why they were able to survive that long and then eventually begin the reconstruction process. You've got a revenue stream of reconstruction for Palantir that they've already won in a press release that was announced in May in terms of different projects that are going to be helped to build up Ukraine. And number two, you get the brand recognition across the entire world that one of the reasons Ukraine survived is because they had targeting software that was able to be used effectively in order to maintain their position as a country and hopefully keep their sovereignty, which was because of Palantir. As a result of that, I think that it's really important that this war hopefully comes to an end for humanity, but also because it's just going to be one of those amazing things that Palantir is going to get the credit for in terms of the responsibility of keeping the country afloat. So overall, hopefully the Ukraine war comes to an end and Palantir's role is going to be highlighted as one of the reasons why they maintained the ability for the country to continue to be a country and not be taken over by a dictatorship. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Those are Alex Karp's latest thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine. Please make sure to subscribe to dailypalantir.com/subscribe, my email newsletter. I'll see you guys in the next one.